Hey, it's Kim from Martin-MadeTV, and I'm here with a few quick tips on how to paint a wall. I'm actually in my daughter's room right now. We're making over her whole room, so please excuse the audio if it sounds really echoey. It's an empty room, that's why it sounds echoey. But we're going to be painting the wall behind me as a chalkboard wall, and I do have a few quick tips to share with you. I think this makes the painting process go by easily, efficiently, no mess, no stress. Also, I'll include a few tips specific to painting a chalkboard wall. Just a few things you need to do to make sure it comes out in the best way possible. So follow along, and I hope this is helpful for you. My first tip will be to prep your space. That means cover up anything that you don't want to get paint on. Painting can be a little bit messy, sometimes splatters happen. So you want to really cover the surfaces that you don't intend to paint. In my case, that is our carpet that we have here. I'm also going to be painting the trim in the room after I paint the walls. I think that's another tip. I like to wait to paint the trim just to make sure it's nice and crisp, and if there are any drips or anything, you can catch them and just cover them up with the trim paint. So in my case today, I'm using plastic table covers. I know most people use drop cloths that you can get from the home improvement store, but these are much cheaper, easier. You can wad them up and throw them away once you're done. And I know you can find them at party stores, but of course, the dollar store. That's where I normally get my tablecloths from. Alright, so I'm back with the floors fully covered. I have my space prepped. I also have all of my supplies out. And today I'm going to be using a metal paint tray with a disposable liner inside of it. Just like I said, no muss, no fuss. I can just take it out and toss it when I'm done with it. I'm also using a paint roller. I normally like to get the ones for smooth and semi-smooth surfaces. And I have a nice angled paintbrush, one of the ones with the soft grip handles. That's just the one I prefer, it's most comfortable. And last but not least, we have the paint that I'm using today, the chalkboard paint. And you want to make sure you stir your paint thoroughly. Unless you just brought it from the hardware store where they mix the color for you and they put it through that little shaking machine, you definitely want to bring it home and stir it thoroughly. Make sure you're stirring all the way to the bottom of the can. That makes sure that all of the colorants and whatever solids they use can get thoroughly mixed within the paint so that the paint performs its best. So here I've done that, and I'm going to get started. Okay, so as you can see, I've gotten started, and this wall will clearly need more than one coat, but I wanted to hop on and give you another tip. First, I actually don't do the edging, around the trim and around the borders until last. I feel like that helps to maybe tie everything in. It's just easier to tackle the bigger space first. Also, when I am tackling the bigger space, I like to paint in about a 3x3 section. So I'll do the 3x3 section and then move on to another one. It's just easiest, I find. I think it's just easiest to load up the roller, do that section. That's about enough paint that you're going to get on the wall, and then load up the roller and do another section. Alright, the first coat is done, not without mistakes, of course, because that's life. I'm going to let this dry for a bit, come back, do a second coat, and then let the wall dry a little bit more. Hopefully, I'll have enough paint because I'm kind of stretched a little thin. But after the second coat, I'll let that dry, probably for a few days, and then come back to prime the chalkboard wall. So I'm back. The second coat is done. It's a little later in the day, so the sun has gone down, but everything was completed. I did the second coat and then waited a few hours because there were a couple of spots that needed to be touched up. Thankfully, I was able to do the entire wall with that 1 quart of paint. So that's all done. I'm going to let it cure, let the paint cure for maybe like a day or two, and then come back to do the priming on the chalkboard wall. Alright, so I'm back. The chalkboard paint is completely dry. It's been 3 days actually since you last saw me, and everything is completely dry, and we're ready to move on to the next step, which is priming the chalkboard wall. Before we get to that, I'll explain briefly why we need to prime the wall. So chalkboard paint by nature is extremely porous. That's how we're able to actually write on it. but after you first paint the wall, it's super porous. So that means if I were to take a piece of chalk now and write Kim in huge letters on the wall, it would actually remain permanent. And the only way to get rid of that would be to paint over the wall. So in order to mitigate that, I'm going to cover the chalkboard in chalk dust. And what that does, it helps chalk, like a really thin layer of chalk, settle into the pores of the wall, so that when it's time to write something on it, we can easily erase it with an eraser and move on. It won't remain permanent. Alright, now we're ready to move on to priming the wall. This process requires 3 easy steps. The first one, as I mentioned, is to cover the entire wall with chalk dust. And you basically do that by taking a piece of chalk and laying it on its side, just to make sure we get like a smooth, even layer all over. And we're going to not do that. And we're going to scrub it or rub it all over the wall. So I'm going to do this off camera, of course. I'll do the whole thing. The second step is going to be taking a paper towel and smearing that chalk dust into the wall all over, just so that it looks, you know, even and smooth. And then the third step will be to wipe down the wall with a damp paper towel. Very simple. Alright, the wall is done. I have a lot more to do in this space. I have to paint the trim, I have to paint the other walls, take care of that door, that window, so many other things, because this is actually part of my daughter's bedroom makeover, which I'll be covering in more detail here on the channel. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of those videos. But I will have my painting tips listed down below in the description box, and if you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave them down in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.